Listen, this is a city of grit. This is a city of hard work, of kind of hustle and being able to figure things out. The water tanks are pure Chicago. Ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated by the water tanks. I saw them everywhere. And they were kind of a thing of mystery, and you wonder, what are they doing up there? They were really picturesque, so it's something I really enjoyed, and I came to regard as something that was just part of the cityscape. It was kind of disappointing in my later years to see them disappearing one by one by one. In 1871, Chicago had a fire which is known as the Great Chicago Fire. The Chicago Fire leveled the whole business center of Chicago, a significant part of its residential area. People were without homes, without jobs momentarily. The city grew remarkably fast. Chicago not only pioneered ways to build buildings of structures that were fireproof, but engineers also tried to figure out ways to beat the chances of destruction by fire. And of course, the one thing that is the antidote for fire is water. Even though the old warehouses and factories were built with sturdy brick walls, a lot of the interiors were still wood. What do you do? Of how to make sprinkler systems in a factory building. And how do you do it? You put a giant tank, like a giant barrel on top of the building, holds, say, 35,000, 50,000 gallons of water. Then it sits up high. There's a pipe that comes down that then leads to a network of pipes in the building. That if there's a fire, there's little faucets in a way that will suddenly open up, sprinkle the fire out. It reduced the risks of our business being destroyed and burning down. There was a period of trial and error. But by 1900, the technology had been developed. You could reliably put it on top of a building, and if there's a fire, you put it out with the most reliable force on Earth, pure gravity. Chicago has a unique feature to its tanks. There is the base of steel and iron of lattice work, and there's a tank. But at the bottom of the tank is a little railed like a balcony, a little gallery that goes around it. And that's a feature that you see, it's a hallmark of a Chicago tank. The water tanks worked.
I'm one of the owners of a building on the near west side that was the original Jewel Tea Company on Washington Boulevard that was built in 1908. If you were getting coffee in Chicago in the early 1900s, it was coming out of this building right here. It was being loaded onto carriages with horses. On the top of it, it read Jewel Tea. And that's today's Jewel grocery stores. That's cool history to me. We were having to make decisions about the maintenance of the building, how to keep it structurally sound. So we did an engineering study, and then the engineer said, hey, you may want to take this water tank down.
Mayor Daley was tasking the department heads to figure out a way to save the tanks. The city held a competition how to repurpose water tanks and give them a new life.
One of the proposals was to be used as a water storage facility for one of the new schools. Mayor Daley was a champion of sustainability in Chicago, and he wanted Chicago to be kind of a leading city in sustainability. He wanted to create new construction standards that modernized schools and brought them up to sustainability standards.
They saw our tank and they saw that it was still structurally sound and the integrity of it was good. They wanted to save it. They wound up putting it on one of the structures over at Skinner Elementary School on Monroe Street. It was so crazy to see this big crane pull up in front of the building here. I had my two little kids and we just watched it, and then they lowered it onto a flatbed truck right on the street here below us. Just the engineering of it, there's some kid probably looking at it today thinking, what is this thing? I think it causes kids to think, how did we do this? What was the purpose of this? What was its benefit? With it being up here on the roof, I think 90% of people never saw it. But now it's sitting out on the street and it's pretty prominent. It's probably no more than 20 feet above your eyes and people see it. And I think it is a nice piece of history. I think we have this bias of we look at technology today and we're like, wow, we're really smart people. Then you look back, like they built that thing in the days of horse and carriage. This building's 100 years old, so that tank is 100 years old, and I don't see any reason why in another 100 years it wouldn't still be there.
There's something unique that you find in Chicago. You can't go to every city and find a water tower. I'm a Chicago architect and painter. I kind of think of them as characters in and around the city. You can see me walking around neighborhoods such as these, scouting out the hidden treasures that are the water towers. As an architect, I just find these pretty fascinating structures that are kind of standalone characters in the city that are often overlooked and underutilized in many ways. I try to paint them and capture them as an archivist in many ways. Seeing them regularly made me think of it as a character in my environment and wanting to paint it. And you get to know them by painting them. Each one has kind of its own personality. Some of them have a platform of legs, some of them have a platform of brick, some have ladders, some don't. Some are in various states of disrepair. The building there is my marker for the water tower. You know, it's gone. One other interesting feature that I learned just through painting these is you have the bands around the water towers, and most folks may not know that the bands actually get closer in spacing vertically the further down the water tower you get, because when they were filled with water, that was tend to be where the most pressure was. I think that's where my architectural sensibilities kind of come into play, and I'm I typically say my paintings are 80% planning, 20% painting. There's lots more planning that goes into effect and kind of where I'm going to put color, where I'm going to put water to kind of get these things to look as realistic as possible. Before I even put anything to paper, I've already drawn it one time, become intimately familiar with like everything from the little nuts and bolts to the shadows to the structures that are on here. And that'll take upwards of 80 to 100 hours, maybe more, depending on the complexity of the painting. And then it's probably another 40 to 50, 60 hours to get it painted. People tends to strike a chord with most people when they're familiar with the water tower. You meet a lot of avid water tower fans. I actually had somebody come to my show a couple years ago that provided me a book on water towers. And I use that as my inspiration to hunt down even more. Just nice to see people getting excited about something as mundane as a water tower. It's very exciting for me. It's like finding that piece of treasure and it's like, oh, I gotta paint that before it potentially goes away.
I love Chicago history and the buildings that are here, and I do think they're important. They're fascinating little details, and when you learn about why they existed in the context of the Chicago fire, it's too easy to forget about all this stuff. This has such a great history, and so much of it is being torn down. And when you see some of these water tanks, you're like, ah, that served a real purpose that kept this neighborhood alive and safe for many, many years.
When they deteriorated or posed a safety hazard, or the building owners did not want to put the money into repairing something that needs repair, out of necessity, they had to disappear. The city did actively try to figure out how to preserve these tanks. You can do this with a landmark, but what was interesting, in most of the cases, the building itself isn't a landmark, and the tank is on top of it. Can you landmark the tank and not the building? But over time, I think the realities of neglect and rotting wood and things has, made it more and more challenging to preserve the tanks. Even the tanks that still have water in them, I mean, that's still something that needs maintenance. There are people who love the tanks and think they're beautiful. And then people who thought they were just unsightly utilitarian structures. The ones that people really pay attention to are the wood tanks. That's the ones that are diminishing. I'm afraid to think of what the number is now. I would think it might be under 100. I've witnessed many of them disappearing. In fact, some of my favorites, I'll go to the site and there'll be the metal armature and the tank is gone, and I go, hey, that was a nice one.